Hey, welcome back. What's up and how's it going? Shout out to my subscribers and to all who have nothing better to do than give me a view. I really appreciate your time and interest in my ramblings. Dave Rubin is having some trouble understanding how societies are structured, how they could be structured, and what atheism and indeed theism is. Let's see if we can help him out a bit. I think that is preferable to having one person's interpretation of what Odin or indeed Grogu wants our societies to be like.
I spent most of my adult years as an atheist, as a non-believer. I am not an atheist anymore. I absolutely am a believer. I wrote about that in my last book. I went on tour with Jordan Peterson. He really helped me move on some of this stuff, but also going through my own spiritual awakening. And by the way, most people go through their own move. You know, well, there are many people who are believers who were once atheists. There's not a ton, I don't think, that were believers that became atheists, or but not to say there are none. And by the way, before I go any further, there are atheists that are good people.
Dave, I want to make it super clear that, of course, you have every right to believe whatever you like. You were an atheist, then took an unplugged vacation, repeatedly had the thought that you weren't an atheist, and so became a theist. You said that you felt the word atheist didn't fit what you believed, as you do believe in something, despite not being sure what it is. Let's leave Jordan Peterson out of this for the time being. So, you were thinking about what you believed, and decided that you believed in something. Cool. Got it. If you have some God belief, then you are not an atheist. I would be very interested in why you hold some God belief, but you certainly don't owe me a damn thing. I, for example, was sitting on the beach one time and decided the word alcoholic didn't apply to me. I simply didn't identify with it, so now I don't call myself an alcoholic. Fine. Great. But as I mentioned, the interesting part of the idea here is why. Do I drink too much or not? Or, in your case, do you have good reasons to believe in a God or not? But you did make a couple claims there. You said that you thought many atheists are becoming theists, and that not many theists are becoming atheists. This is not backed up by facts, Dave. It might be helpful to check your facts before spreading false ideas to the hundreds of thousands who watch your content. I suppose, though, as you often say, the left lies and puts out manipulative content, which I would agree to, that this then is fair game for you to do the same? I would disagree. Perhaps we should lead by example, as Magical Max, the spelling specialist, agrees with me. It must be true. Yes, Dave, there are atheists who are good people. Also many that are bad people. Just like the theists. Good people as well as monsters. So I think we can easily simplify this. Some people are people we consider to be good, and some are not. Great!
I think this last thing with these liberals is the atheist thing. I think the belief thing. They fundamentally still believe that conservatives are backwards, religious believers. And I think that this is a huge problem.
Cool. You got one right. Well, kind of. Yes, politically speaking, if forced into your binary system of left and right, which is a huge mistake, most atheists are in fact liberals. However, that does not mean that most liberals are atheists. I hope you can understand the difference here. Most people who identify as being LGBT are women. This, however, does not mean that most women identify with being LGBT. If we found that women are better at dealing three-card Monty, for example, you cannot reasonably say that this is because they are members of the LGBT community. Without doing a lot more work, at least. See how that works? This conflation of yours is causing you problems. You are blaming atheism for people you think are crazy on the left. I'm trying to point out that, although I agree that there are crazy people on both sides, you have not shown that atheism is the reason for their craziness. I would suggest, perhaps incorrectly, that it is irrationality which you are seeing. This is not restricted to atheists, the religious, nor those who claim some sort of spirituality. Irrationality is common among humans. It seems none of us are spared its wrath. While people just like you, just like Fox, and just like CNN and MSNBC, are spreading this irrationality by making arguments, well, just like yours here, I'm trying to fight this irrationality, trying to show people where their arguments are garbage. And here we are again, Dave. Welcome back. Like and subscribe, buddy. You go on to say that liberals fundamentally think that conservatives are backwards religious believers. While I have no problem admitting that some, or perhaps many liberals may feel this way, I wonder how you think you have the ability to tell millions of people what and why they think as they do. You said backwards religious believers. Skipping over the backwards, in fact, this is true. Most conservatives are, in fact, religious. And it is further true that this is a problem, perhaps to the extent that one may use such a word as backwards. But let's wait a bit on that one.
It cannot work as an organizing principle. Societies cannot work around without something that is bigger than themselves.
Dave, you obviously don't understand what atheism is, which is strange, given that you said you lived most of your life as one. Let me see if I can help. Dave, do you believe that jalapeno-flavored chewing gum tastes good? I'm going to assume your answer to be no. Sorry if I got that wrong. So we are saying that you do not believe that jalapeno gum is good. But Dave, that cannot work as an organizing principle. Well, of course it can't. Who the hell thinks that whether people like jalapeno-flavored gum or not could ever be an organizing principle with which to order a society? In order to order a society, a group would need a lot more ideas to come together than simply whether one likes a particular flavor of gum or not. Back to your point. Atheism, or non-belief, cannot work as an organizing principle. But just like the jalapeno-flavored gum example, it's not supposed to. Atheism is a single position on a single claim. Do you believe jalapeno-flavored gum is good? No, I do not. Do you believe in a God? No, I do not. Neither could, are, nor purport to be an organizing principle. Many religious people seem to miss this point, and some even go further to call atheism a religion. While I admit there are many crazy non-believers out there, atheism itself, by any definition you want to use, still only addresses a single concern. Religions, on the other hand, often, always, almost always, offer many different dictates on people's lives. This is fundamentally different from atheism, and therefore, not surprisingly, fundamentally different from a stance on jalapeno-flavored gum. You then go on to say that societies cannot work without something that is bigger than themselves. I would actually agree to this. Groups seem to need a goal which is larger than any one member of that group. Unfortunately, however, you are once again limiting your scope of investigation, just like you did with the left and the right in politics. This does sound like an appeal to incredulity fallacy. You seem to be suggesting that the thing which societies need, which is bigger than the individuals, must be a god. Dave, can you think of no other possibility? Sports teams come together and attempt to win, or have fun. Or, if I'm on the team, neither. Wildlife groups come together and attempt to save animals. Programmers come together to create a video game. Not large enough for you? The United Nations, be they useful or not, has come together with a goal of international peace and security. The International Space Stations, the James Webb Telescope, hell, the flipping ice capades. Is that still a thing? Apparently it is. I think I want to be cryogenically frozen until the ice capades is not a thing. All of these groups, as well as thousands of other examples, all do have organizing principles, something that the group cares about or focuses on, which is larger than the individual. And none of them, Dave, are a god.
And I think this is now becoming a huge problem. We now live in what I would say is sort of a godless society that has only ushered in more religion And that ushers in more bureaucrats and crazy people who just want to control people.
Well, Dave, as I pointed out, you in fact do not live in a godless society, although the supporting structure for America is secular. Most Americans are believers. However, as you think America is becoming godless, can you name 3 openly atheist politicians? It is indeed quite difficult. Now, can you name 10 presidents who have said, "God bless America"? Not so difficult. Also, as I've pointed out, America is not becoming more religious. It is becoming less religious. But again, you seem to be pointing to this actual increase in atheism, which you oddly say is an increase in religion, as the cause for more bureaucrats and crazy people who want to control others. You have not made this link. I would point to 2 potential causes which are unrelated to atheism. Number 1, increased irrationality due to not learning about philosophy. And 2, media narratives that people follow due to not being taught how to parse the constant, barely factual bombardment by those on all sides. Yes, politicians seem to want to control people. This control, in part, is done by the media promoting their narratives. In any event, this control is antithetical to a democracy. So much so, in fact, that I would suggest any who actually want to be a politician probably don't meet the job requirements.
So now I want to link this to a video from Jordan Peterson. So Jordan Peterson's been talking about this for a long time. Here's Jordan Peterson in 2018. This is 4 years ago, talking about the necessity of religion in order to fight tyranny. And you tell me,
if you think that religion is necessary to fight tyranny, I would ask you how the Canadian truckers stood up against Justin Trudeau's mandates. While we're on the topic, which religion was used by BLM, or indeed the January 6 people? Sure, many of them were and are religious, but saying that they all share the same religion, or that their individual religions were the reason they were fighting against what they saw as tyranny, well, that is simply wrong. They were all pretty clear about why they were fighting. Freedom. Freedom from police brutality. Free elections. Whether you agree with them or not, perhaps listening to what they said is important.
I do believe that the biblical texts are foundational. I believe it in the Nietzschean sense. And, Nietzsche, of course, announced famously in the late 1800s that God was dead. And the typical rationalist atheist regards that as a triumphalist proclamation. But that wasn't that for Nietzsche. And Nietzsche knew perfectly well and said immediately afterward that the consequences of that was going to be bloody catastrophe because everything was going to fall. And he predicted the rise of communism, for example, and the deaths of tens of millions of people in the aftermath of the death of God. Because Nietzsche knew perfectly well that when you pull the cornerstone out from underneath a building, that even though it may stay aloft in midair like a cartoon character that's wandered off a cliff for some period of time, that it will inevitably crumble and that it will be replaced by something that's perhaps far worse. Now, Nietzsche hoped it would be replaced by man's ability to recreate meaning spontaneously out of his psyche, for example, which I think is a doomed enterprise. But he knew that in the interval, it would be replaced by both nihilism and by communist totalitarianism, which is a hell of a prediction because it was done like 40 years before the events actually unfolded.
There have been terrible bad things done in the name of God, and there have been terrible bad things done in the name of communism and atheism. I don't think we can. I don't want to weigh them up.
I'll weigh them up.
You'll weigh them up and you'll say...
No problem. But we're living on the corpse of our ancestors like we always have. That's a very old idea. I think that the reason that the Western societies essentially work quite well is because they act out a Judeo-Christian ethic, and one that's essentially predicated on utmost regard for the sovereignty of the individual. So the individual is sovereign in relationship to the state, which is a remarkable idea and one that's fundamentally religious in its essence.
Okay, so one step at a time. Jordan here, just like everyone, can believe whatever they like. If they're not interested in being rational and reasonable, they leave open many interpretations, as Jordan often does when he gets outside of his particular area, clinical psychology. So, Jordan believes that the biblical texts are foundational. I wonder if he knows that a great many of these biblical ideas actually come from older ideas, stories, and religions. The Bible cannot be foundational if it is not the foundation. But believe what you like. Jordan doesn't seem to understand Nietzsche. So I'm not sure what he means by believing the biblical text in a Nietzschean sense. However, to be clear, Nietzsche, perhaps surprisingly, given that he did not believe in the existence of the Christian God, had quite a bit of respect for the Old Testament, but detested the New Testament, which he felt didn't improve upon or progress the Old Testament. Yes, Nietzsche is very well known for having said, God is dead. What he meant, which you skipped over, is that the understandings and ideas which came about from the Enlightenment, that the world is subject to physical laws and not divine dictatorship, that governing bodies need not be organized around divine power, but could be organized by consent and or rationality. You are right, though. He didn't see this as necessarily good. He was in fact worried about what may come after. Yes, as Jordan says, Nietzsche did know that if we remove a system, another system will take its place. The problem is, no one knows what system will come next if it is not first set up. You're perfectly able to believe that Western societies work well because they act out a Judeo-Christian ethic. But if you are interested in truth, you may look to the founding documents of America, or the founding fathers themselves. They created these documents from the ideas of the Enlightenment, consent and rationality, not from religious ethics. You can easily see this if you like. Take a quick look through Deuteronomy or Corinthians or a bunch of other parts and take notes on the differences. Of course, there's also similarities, as there are with the Quran, the Vedas, the Tripitaka, sorry for my terrible pronunciation, and many, many more. Seeing similarities between two things does not mean one caused the other. This is fallacious reasoning and is called post hoc ergo propter hoc, also known as faulty causation. Jordan went on to talk about individual sovereignty, suggesting that this Judeo-Christian ethic has the utmost regard for the sovereignty of the individual. This is a very interesting claim. If it were true, then it does make me wonder about all the slavery passages in the Bible. Yes, I hear you saying, that is the Old Testament. Well, if you are saying that, then perhaps you remember your boy Jesus saying, slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything you do. This certainly does not sound like individual sovereignty. If you are interested in when these ideas about individual sovereignty did start to gain traction, try reading about the Enlightenment. To say that this individual sovereignty is fundamentally religious, well, you would have to fundamentally change what the word religious means, which is what Jordan is always seemingly trying to do. Religious is defined as relating to or believing in a religion, and religion is defined as the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods. So, for Jordan to be correct, when using this definition, that individual sovereignty is fundamentally religious, he would have to show that individual sovereignty comes from the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power. Jordan, how can human individual sovereignty come from a controlling power? This is a ridiculous claim that Jordan here holds on to because although he doesn't believe in an actual existent God, he has this seemingly irresistible attraction to calling himself religious. He has said, I act as if God exists, and I am terrified that he might. This is a very telling statement, but, as always, you do you, Jordan. I would offer an olive branch, though. Stories are important. They are a great way of teaching a great many things. The Bible has some great stories, as do many, many writings, both older and newer than the Bible. There is nothing religious about liking or using stories to teach ideas. Yes, religions do use this method, but so do kindergartens. It's a real shame that Jordan speaks about things he knows very little about. I actually like listening to him when he speaks on the subject of psychology, but holy friggin' cringe city when he gets outside of that area. His notions on philosophy, religion, and atheism honestly sound like they're coming from an infant. Finally on this point, who the hell cares what Nietzsche said or thought? It is wholly unimportant what this or that person thought. The importance only lies in the truthfulness of the idea. So then, here it is. The Enlightenment removed the necessity of a religious ordering of societies. Societies which are not ordered via religion will have to have another organizing principle. There are lots of bad organizing principles. It is likely that some of them will be used. Nietzsche was right. In some areas, as Jordan pointed out, there were huge problems. In other areas, like, say, the United States of America, for example, much better, although certainly imperfect, organizational principles were used.
He's so good. He's just so good. Look, he's a friend of mine, obviously, and I toured with the guy, and I love him, and he influenced me in incredible ways. But like, you could hear that stuff over and over again. I mean, trust me, I've now watched that clip like 10 times.
Dave, this is a huge problem. I understand you like Jordan. I understand he's a friend of yours, but do you understand that you are showing your bias? I would certainly hope you let us know about your bias in order to warn us against believing what you say. But it really didn't sound like that. He is a friend. You agree with what he's saying. You listen to that clip 10 times. Dave, indoctrination is the process of teaching a person or group to accept a set of beliefs uncritically. What you're doing is furthering your own indoctrination. Perhaps, and it is completely up to you, but maybe there would be some benefit in hearing opposing views. You know, just to test what you want to believe is actually true. Jordan put a bunch of words together there, and I'm happy for you that you liked them. But they were trash. He doesn't understand religion. He doesn't understand Nietzsche. He isn't a theist. He likes the stories. He thinks that stories are important. Well, congratulations. I like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but that doesn't make any of it true.
If you remove God from the equation, some level of belief, some foundational belief, what he talks about as the Judeo-Christian ethos in essence, that it will be replaced by something horrible. And that is exactly what Nietzsche was warning, right? So the atheists sort of think, oh, it'll be replaced by the human psyche, that we'll all sort of believe that, or maybe not believe isn't the word, that we'll all sort of come to this realization about what humanity is, and we'll be very, very evolved, and everything will be pleasant and good and equal and all of that stuff.
This is called a slippery slope argument, Dave. If we remove some level of foundational religious belief as an organizational structure from societies, it will be replaced by something horrible. This is incorrect, Dave. It isn't what Jordan said. It isn't what Nietzsche said. And it's fallacious. Jordan, like Nietzsche, said that it could be replaced by something horrible. As I have just said, in many cases it was replaced by something horrible. In some cases, it was replaced by something much, much better. Look left. Look right. You're seeing it. America is an example of using other principles, rather than a God, as an organizing principle which is working out reasonably well. Again, certainly not perfectly. Also, you could look at Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. You then go on to create another fallacy. This one is called a straw man fallacy. This is where you incorrectly define the position of your opponent. You've just said that the atheists think it will be replaced by the human psyche and come to this realization about what humanity is. We'll be very evolved and everything will be pleasant and good, equal and all that stuff. I'm not sure who you're referring to, but if that person exists, you have in me an atheist saying that person is not skeptical nor correct. I have no clue how the human psyche could act as an organizing principle for a society. You may be interested in knowing that the psyche in psychology is thought of as the totality of the human mind. How are we supposed to design a system based on the human mind? At least a political system. I just don't get it. You have said that atheists will come to a realization about what humanity is. Well, it may be surprising, but I already know what humanity is. It is the collective group of all humans. You then went on to say that atheists think they will be very evolved. Again, whomever is saying such things really needs an education. Things are not more or less evolved than other things. Evolution is not a ladder. I certainly hope that everything will eventually become pleasant and good, equal and all that stuff. But it's not going to happen without a lot of work.
But you're seeing the fruits of what that has brought to us.
No, Dave. You are limiting your scope drastically to fit your narrative. What you are doing is taking the things you think are bad, all the things you mentioned in your video and ascribing that to atheism because you think the left are largely atheistic. You are wrong on so many levels it is painful. You're limiting your scope to belief in a God and not. This is fine, so long as you've controlled for other variables. You haven't. Do you honestly think the only difference between those in power now and those who recently lost it is atheism? Dave, take a look at confounds. This is what you're creating in your analysis of this situation. You're only looking at the things you think are bad. You're not showing us that they are bad. You aren't looking at any of the good things the left might have done. You're ascribing all of those bad things to a single difference of belief in a God. You're also missing the fact that most on the left are actually not non-believers. Only about 18% report as non-believers. Pretty sloppy work, Dave.
The fear of the last liberal that they'll be thought of as some sort of believing religious moron. It's like, Bill, those are the people that are now defending your ability to be a free-thinking atheist.
Actually, you may very well be right on this point. Standing back and looking strictly at free speech, it is probably fair to say that the left is restricting speech more than the right. However, if we broaden our view to, say, rights for bodily autonomy for women, it seems clear that the right is the one enacting more restrictions. Look, I have no idea what the calculus would be to relate these two, but it does seem like everyone has some work to do.
Who are all of the people defending all of the societal principles that you're laying out? It's now conservatives. It's Republicans.
You, as I have mentioned several times, have a very limited view on this topic. You are limiting your choices to the Democrats and the Republicans. Although I fully admit that those are your present choices, your limiting of the topic here is part of a larger problem. According to this framing, Bill has a choice: to stay there or move to your team. Bill has lots of problems with his team, but sees yours as having more problems. And yes, there are some things Bill likes about your team. You, Dave, are doing the same. You had and still have a choice. You can stay or you can move to Bill's team. There are more things on Bill's team you don't like than the few on your team you don't like. Yet there may be some things on Bill's team which you do like. Most of the time, we do not see people change teams on a single issue. Both teams have their stances on a great many issues, and so one point is not always super important. Although, of course, there are certainly single-issue voters. Perhaps these two parties or choices aren't enough for the bulk of issues that we have. If you're hungry and go into a restaurant, you would expect more than only a menu with 2 set items. But hell, it's only government. Can't be that important, right?
Florida man knew something that you California liberals have long forgotten. You decided to believe in nothing other than the state. You replaced God, as Jordan Peterson talked about. What Nietzsche was saying was, this is a warning, man. God is dead. It's a warning. And the warning is, man, you're going to erase thousands of years of ideas. What are you going to replace it with? Communism. You're going to replace it with collectivism and perhaps something much worse. Welcome to where we are at right now.
Okay, deep breaths. Deep breaths. We search for truth dispassionately, remember? Okay, the idea is a sound idea. If we take out the support structure for, well, anything, we should be concerned about which new support structure will be used. This is a very fair point. I personally will further agree with you that communism is not a good support structure. However, and this is really why I chose this video, you are again limiting your choices. God-structured versus not God-structured. This fails to miss all the differing structured religious countries around the world. Some have seemingly reasonable, fair societies, and others obviously do not. So structuring a society on God alone is just not enough to tell us if it will be good or bad. Yes, this certainly includes Jordan's strange Judeo-Christian structured countries as well. And you're contrasting structuring a society on a God to communism? Or perhaps collectivism? Are these the only options, Dave? This is your fallacy of false dichotomy again. Let me see if I can help. Societies, as we have previously mentioned, are groups of people living together for mutual benefit. You, Jordan, and you even brought Nietzsche into this. have all said that societies need a structure, and have warned that taking away an existing structure allows the possibility of a negative structure taking its place. All three of you are, of course, correct. So instead of limiting your choices of what could replace it, why not widen your choices of what could replace it? Why not have a structure based on freedom, limited government, individual responsibility? Sounds familiar. But obviously, it wasn't perfect. So let's start trying to find the errors of our ways. No? Notice how none of this has anything to do with a religion or God. A structure based on freedom. I think people's personal freedom to do as they like is a very important concept. Not because some God told me, rather because I prefer my own freedom. I imagine others may also enjoy theirs. A structure based on limited government. This directly ties to the freedom point. The larger the government, the more restrictive they are on freedoms. How large should a government be? What a great question. A structure based on individual responsibility. Aha, we found the problem. This is where your argument, as well as Jordan's, falls to shreds on the floor. Since the Enlightenment, many have begun to learn this lesson. Others, well, apparently not so much. Remember that during the Enlightenment, people turned away from arguments from authority because they were learning about reason and using evidence. To oversimplify then, we were left with believers and those who began using reason and evidence. Sometimes, those two groups agreed. For example, murder is wrong. They did, however, begin to differ on why murder might be wrong. Who cares, right? As long as we agree, then it doesn't matter? Horribly wrong. It really, really matters. The believers may have pointed to Scripture, citing that murder is wrong, whereas others perhaps started using reason, which could convince anyone reasonable of their stance. Other times, these two groups disagreed, perhaps on matters of, say, astronomy. Unsurprisingly, they both pointed to their same reasons for their stances. The religious may point to Scripture, whereas others to evidence and reason. And we are still here, and this is the problem. In societies, it seems as if we're always going to have the issue of different people believing in different things for which they have no evidence. That is perfectly fine and may even be a good thing. The structure of a society, though, cannot take any of these unfounded beliefs into account. The reason is simple. If there's no good evidence or argument to accept a claim, then how could you convince another to believe it? How can I convince you that as we die, part of our soul wisps away to Saturn, while another part is sent to Never mind. Others would need evidence of this, or at least, I would hope. But the left that you are pointing to, Dave, isn't any better, or really different. As I see it, perhaps incorrectly, they are promoting an ideology. These are dangerous, as we've seen some examples of what happens to people who go against an ideology, both on social media to some, and some at the hands of cult leaders. It may indeed be this ideology that you are seeing, which, as a structure for society, is exactly like a religion. What we say goes. This is the truth. You must be silenced. This is called an argument from authority, Dave, and it is identical to how Jordan's Judeo-Christian ethos has always worked. Don't you think just maybe it might be a good idea to see if we can get people to agree to something, as opposed to telling them it is right or wrong? And so, despite having a structure based on freedom, limited government, and individual responsibility being a good thing, perhaps we can add an idea or two. How about education, truth, progress, or maybe fairness, equality, and transparency? If you want to talk about structures for societies, Dave, you're going to have to take your invisible friend out of the conversation. If he, she, it, they are real, please do show us. If not, you're simply saying that your pet dragon tells you murder is wrong, just like the ideologues on the left telling you that 2 + 2 is 5. If you want to have a conversation about the best way to structure a society, You have to leave your Sky Daddy and all other unevidenced beliefs at the door. Failing to do so allows me to disagree with you, simply because of my unevidenced beliefs in Grogu being a prophet. Maybe me arguing about Grogu and you arguing about Yahweh is not as helpful as having a rational dialogue about the evidence.